Viewer discretion is advised. This series covers real events involving violence, crime and strong language that some viewers may find distressing. The content is intended for mature audiences. Please proceed with caution. Welcome to London's Dark Archives. In Chapter 2, we will cover the most notorious gangsters in London's history. Their story has become legend. There are multiple layers and various avenues that we will follow on their story. The Kray twins, Ronnie and Reggie, were two of the most notorious criminals in British history, ruling London's East End during the 1960s. Known for their violence, charm and control of organised crime, their story is one of power, fear and tragedy. In this chapter, we'll explore the rise of the Krays in detail, from their early years to their reign as kings of the underworld and their eventual fall. Each week we'll release a new episode, digging deeper into their lives, their gang, the firm, and how they left an indelible mark on London's dark history. Growing up in East London and later living in South Essex, the Krays were more than just legends. They were part of the fabric of the community. Everyone round here has a connection to them or a story about them. My own link, although small, comes through my uncle who rented a flat off Charlie in the 90s. Nothing glamorous, but that's the thing with the Krays. So much of their story is grounded in the ordinary lives of East End families. I drink in pubs they frequented, and often hear tales from the old boys who lived through the days when the twins ruled the East End. Some of those old boys were just young boys at the time, but always willing to share their tale. The Krays' reign feels like a living memory, passed down in stories that have shaped how people see the East End to this day. But behind the myth and the glamour, they were a product of their time, of a tough, working class world where family was everything, and the law was just another force to fight against. Ronnie and Reggie were born on October 24th, 1933 in Oxton, East London. In the 1930s, Bethnal Green and the broader East End of London were defined by a unique blend of poverty, resilience and tightly knit communities. The area was largely working class, and the people there had a strong sense of identity tied to their neighbourhoods and families. For many, life was a daily struggle, but they faced it with determination and grit. Families lived in cramped conditions, often in small terraced houses or flats that barely offered enough space for the number of residents. It weren't uncommon for 3 generations to live under one roof. Many houses lacked basic amenities, with outdoor toilets and shared washhouses being part of daily life. Overcrowding meant privacy was rare, and neighbours were often deeply involved in each other's lives, for better or for worse. Life in Bethnal Green weren't just hard, it was relentless. The tight living spaces forced people to spend a lot of time outdoors, and kids like the Krays were often seen playing football in the streets. Even play could turn rough. It's said that a local milkman once scolded a young Ronnie for kicking a ball into his cart. The boy didn't apologise. Instead, he threatened to throw the milkman in the river, a glimpse of the intimidation tactics he would later perfect. The East End had a reputation for being tough but close-knit. People relied on their neighbours for support, whether it was for borrowing a bit of sugar or standing together against outsiders. The community was built on mutual respect, but it was also built on knowing when to keep your mouth shut. This atmosphere of self-reliance meant that many turned a blind eye to local crime as long as it didn't affect them. A common story from the time is how people used to leave their doors unlocked because they knew everyone on the street. However, this didn't mean people trusted each other completely. The Kray twins' mother, Violet, was known for always having a cup of tea ready for anyone who come by, but she weren't naive. She made sure her boys knew how to defend themselves early on. In one instance, a neighbour told a story of how Violet proudly watched on the doorstep as a young Reggie punched out a much bigger boy who'd been picking on Ronnie. pubs were central to East End life. They weren't just places to drink, but social hubs where people gathered to exchange news, gossip and make business deals, sometimes legal, sometimes not. Local boxing clubs played a significant role, offering a way for young men to toughen up, learn discipline and earn respect. Boxing was a way out for some, but for others it was a step into a world of crime where toughness was the currency of power. There's a well-worn tale of how the Kray's father, Charlie, or Charles, once won an entire week's worth of wages in a single night at a local pub. Betting on a bare-knuckle fight, it was said he had an instinct for gambling but also knew how to talk his way out of any sticky situation. This skill, or the gift of the gab, was something Reggie would later inherit, making him the more suave and business-minded twin. The majority of Bethnal Green's men worked as dockers, labourers or in the small factories scattered across the area. These were gruelling jobs with long hours, but work was often unstable. When times were tough, men might take to the streets to hustle for an extra cash, sometimes for illegal activities like selling stolen goods or smuggling. Women typically worked in the textile industry or as cleaners and seamstresses to supplement their household income. There was a constant undercurrent of economic insecurity which pushed many into the black market to make ends meet. The East End was already a notorious hotbed for crime long before the Krays was born. Local gangs had been operating since the 19th century, and in the 30s gang warfare was common, with various groups vying for control over protection rackets, illegal betting and extortion. The Kray twins would have grown up surrounded by stories of these local figures, men who commanded respect through violence and intimidation. Distrust of the police was widespread. The working class residents of the East End often saw the police as outsiders, representatives of a system that didn't care about their struggles. This bred a culture where people turned to their own networks for protection, settling disputes through family connections or local gangsters rather than involving the law. For many in Bethnal Green, the path to success weren't found in education or legitimate jobs, but through crime. Young men like the Krays would have grown up seeing criminals as figures of admiration, men who had pulled themselves out of poverty through their wits and with their fists, rather than relying on a system that had largely failed them. Violet Kray, the twins' mother, was the heart of the family. Known for her strong maternal instincts, she was highly protective of her children. She came from a working class background and had a significant influence on the twins, instilling a sense of family loyalty in them from a young age. Charles, or Charlie Kray Sr., their father, was less present in their lives. Known for being a bit of a rogue, he was frequently absent, dodging military service during World War II by going on a run. He was a charming but unreliable man, and this would have shaped the twins' perception of masculinity and family responsibility. Cannonball Lee, their maternal grandfather, was a bare-knuckle boxer and a bit of a legend in the East End. His reputation for toughness and his role in the local boxing scene would have been an inspiration for the twins. He had the respect of the community, and his influence likely planted the seeds for the twins' interest in physical dominance and crime. Charlie Kray, the eldest brother, was more reserved compared to the twins, often seen as the good one. However, he weren't entirely innocent, and he would later become involved in their criminal activities. For now though, he stayed out of the limelight, working normal jobs to support the family. Ronnie and Reggie Kray didn't just wake up one day as notorious gangsters. Their journey into crime began early, and understanding their useful misdeeds helps explain how they evolved into fearless leaders of the firm. Even as young boys, the Krays were known for their aggression. They was tough kids, quick to use their fists to settle disputes, whether in the schoolyard or on the streets. Teachers struggled to control them, and they often clashed with authority figures. In one instance, it's said that Reggie knocked out another boy's front teeth after a particularly vicious argument, setting a precedent for the violence they would later use as adults. By their early teens, the Krays were involved with local street gangs, participating in minor criminal activities like pickpocketing and shoplifting. These early ventures into crime weren't just about making money, they were about establishing dominance and building a reputation. Even at a young age, the twins had an instinct for power, and they quickly learned that violence and intimidation could get them what they wanted. One early anecdote tells of the twins stealing sweets from a corner shop in Bethnal Green when they were just 10 years old. The shopkeeper, knowing how dangerous their family was, hesitated to confront them directly. Instead, he went to Violet, hoping she would discipline them. But when the boys come home, Violet only smiled and told the shopkeeper they'll grow out of it. Little did he know they were only just getting started. Their grandfather, Cannonball Lee, had been a bare-knuckle boxer, and this fighting spirit clearly ran in the family. The twins took up boxing as young boys, and while they were talented, the discipline of the sport didn't restrain their violent tendencies. The local boxing clubs became a proving ground for them, where they could test their strength and learn how to use physical force to dominate others. In another story we can recall, a local boxing trainer who had taken the twins under his wing recalled how during a sparring session, Ronnie had gotten particularly angry after being outmatched by an older boy. Instead of just taking the loss, he waited until the boy had left the ring, then ambushed him outside, throwing a brick at his head. This unprovoked attack shook many, but it cemented Ronnie's reputation as someone who couldn't stand losing and who weren't afraid to use brutal force to get even. By the time they was in their mid-teens, the Krays had moved beyond petty crime. They began to mimic the behaviour of older gangsters they'd grown up around, running their own small-scale protection racket in Bethnal Green. They would approach local businesses offering protection from trouble, whereas in reality, they were the trouble. If the shopkeepers didn't pay up, they'd have to suffer the consequences. This was their first real taste of power and control, and they relished in it. An old family friend recounted a time when the twins were just 15 and approached the local butcher about protecting his shop. The butcher, not taking them seriously, told him to run along and play with the other kids. The next morning, when he arrived at his shop, he found his front window was smashed in and his stock was ruined. He went and told Violet what had happened, and she replied calmly, "That will teach you to show my boy some respect." The twins quickly become known for their unpredictability and willingness to use violence. They were feared in the local neighbourhood, and even older boys steered clear of them. Ronnie, in particular, had a short fuse and a propensity for extreme acts of aggression, while Reggie was slightly more controlled. He could be just as dangerous when provoked. Growing up with World War II in the background didn't slow the twins down. The Blitz devastated parts of the East End, including Bethnal Green, but amid the rubble, a black market thrived. The Krays, like many other young men and boys, saw war as a chance to make a name for themselves in the criminal underworld, exploiting the shortages and confusion of wartime London to grow their influence. As the twins were coming of age, they were not the only ones building reputations on the streets of London. Established gangsters like Jack Spot and Billy Hill already ruled the city's underworld. Jack Spot was known for his involvement in protection rackets and street battles, while Billy Hill controlled lucrative smuggling operations and betting rings. Hill, in particular, was a mastermind who used strategy and influence to outmaneuver rivals, qualities that would later inspire the twins. At the same time, a new generation of criminals was rising. Frankie Fraser, also known as Mad Frank, was a young enforcer with a reputation for extreme violence. He would later become a feared figure in the post-war criminal world. Freddie Foreman, another emerging name, would go on to be a key associate of the Krays, known for his role in some of the most notorious operations. These figures all shaped the environment the Krays grew up in, setting the stage for future alliances and rivalries. As we continue our exploration, we'll see how the twins, once on the fringes, would rise to stand alongside these men, ultimately eclipsing many of them in their infamy. And that is just the beginning of the Kray twins' story. As we've seen, the world they grew up in was already rife with crime, violence, and larger-than-life gangsters. But it wouldn't be long before Ronnie and Reggie made their mark, carving out their own empire in the underworld. In the upcoming episodes, we'll explore their teenage years, their first steps into organised crime, and how they forged alliances and rivalries. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode, where we'll take a closer look at how the Krays started building their empire, one that would eventually rule the streets of London. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week as we continue to unravel the dark history of London's most infamous gangsters.